Musical note, music. I also want to take a moment to give a quick shout out to Punch Perfect Boxing. His breakdowns have been nothing short of spectacular. The guy is an absolute...
And we are live. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Punch Perfect Boxing channel. I hope you guys are all doing well. Today I'm going to be doing my Punch Perfect preview for the rematch between Alexander Usyk and Daniel Dubois for the Undisputed Heavyweight World Championship this coming Saturday at Wembley Stadium. As mentioned, this is a rematch. These two met back in 2023 and it was a dominant win for Alexander Usyk. However, that's not what people remember. That dominant victory and that dominant performance was overshadowed by a controversial moment where Daniel Dubois felt to have landed a significant body shot that would have put Alexander Usyk down for the count, but instead it was ruled a low blow. Now, whether you think that's right or whether you think that's wrong, there was a lot of debate at the time, but the facts of the matter are that that controversial moment overshadowed what was a pretty one-sided fight. And Alexander Usyk before that moment and after that moment was dominant. And he didn't just overwhelm Daniel Dubois and force a stoppage, force his corner to throw in the towel, force the referee to intervene. He overwhelmed Daniel Dubois to the point where he decided to take a knee after being hit with the jab and decided not to get back to his feet. So it was a very conclusive finish to the first fight. 2 years later, what has changed in those 2 years to make this a compelling fight and one that we ultimately need to see, other than the fact that these are the guys with the belts and it leads to undisputed? Well, I'm going to discuss that in today's video as I look at the first fight and what went wrong for Dubois and what he's been able to do in the past 2 years to make this weekend more competitive. And has Alexander Usyk lost a step across those two fights against Tyson Fury, which means it's even easier for Daniel Dubois to catch up with him this time? I'm going to discuss all that in this video today, so let's get into it. But before I do, I would love to know, is it going to be repeat or revenge? Let me know in the comment section. So let's get cracking with the breakdown. So heading back to that first fight back in 2023, heading into it, Daniel Dubois was kind of a perennial top 10 heavyweight, but had his ups and downs. It was fair to say that he'd obviously had the Joe Joyce fight where he was coming through as a contender. Joe Joyce was coming through as a contender and they kind of met on the way up. Joe Joyce needed to move fast. Daniel Dubois was kind of steadily building. And ultimately he got outgunned and outclassed by the fighter with just more experience and more years under his belt. He decided to take a knee and decided not to beat the count after his orbital bone, suffered damage and was continuing to get worse. And that earned him the label of quitter. Now, people hate that word when it comes to boxing because these are such tough, durable and brave athletes. And I don't like to use the word or throw it around. And I feel what Daniel Dubois did was the correct call for his career. He was young at the time. He had a lot longer left ahead of him than Joe Joyce did. And ultimately, look at where he is now. I doubt he cares what he did that night against Joe Joyce. And if anything, he's probably grateful to himself that he made that decision. But it does bring negative connotations when you decide, I can no longer continue in a fight. When you make that decision, and it's not your corner, it's not the referee, it's not the ringside doctor. When you make that call, it brings negative connotations. And from there, whilst he rebuilt, there were a couple of moments that maybe fed into the idea that Daniel Dubois is mentally not tough. The Kevin Lerena fight was one where he was down a couple of times in the opening round, but ultimately he injured his knee there and was able to get through that and came away with some credit because most fighters, when their ACL goes in a fight, wouldn't be able to turn it around like Daniel Dubois did. But there were some shaky moments in there that led to more question marks about him. And when he got in with Alexander Usyk, it just felt that he hadn't really dealt with his mental problems yet. And he didn't quite have the confidence in himself to be able to go out there and give Alexander Usyk a real challenge. And for the first time in a long time, Alexander Usyk was fighting at home. Although he's Ukrainian and the fight took place in Poland, he had a home crowd there. And he hasn't fought where he's been the home favourite for a very long time. So this was a big, significant event for him, and he'd ultimately earned it because he is boxing's ultimate road warrior. Now, when the fight got underway, Alexander Usyk was simply too good for him. He was mesmerising Daniel Dubois, and Daniel Dubois was trying to go tit for tat with Alexander Usyk, and that's incredibly difficult to do. It's ultimately like trying to play chess with a grandmaster. He's a step ahead of you. Every time you try to throw one, he makes you miss and throws one back. And if it's Alexander Usyk, he's going to throw more than one back. It's going to be 2 or 3, and he's going to continue to bamboozle you and go through the gears. After dominating early, then arrives that moment where Daniel Dubois just decides to take a chance and throw a big shot downstairs. Now, it connects kind of on the belt line, and Usyk's reaction, I think, causes the referee to step in and just assume it was a low blow. I don't think in that instance the referee actually saw the shot and where it landed, but because of Usyk's reaction, he sells it well, and I think the referee believes, yep, that's a low blow. Now, regardless of what you think, I ultimately thought it was a low blow, but Daniel Dubois clearly realised that there's a bit of a weakness there. But ultimately, it didn't matter, because from that moment, Alexander Usyk did what he does best. He goes through the gears, turned it up a notch, and just basically beat Daniel Dubois into submission. And like I said earlier in the video, it was a knockout from a jab. He continued to hit Daniel Dubois from every single angle, and in the 9th round, after landing a jab, Daniel Dubois decided he needed to take a knee and he couldn't deal with it anymore. And the fight was over. Alexander Usyk in the ring afterwards kind of ignored and shrugged off any controversy around the low blow. I think Queensberry and Daniel Dubois tried to sell that fact to potentially get him a rematch or make a fight down the road interesting, like this fight this weekend between them. Alexander Usyk also gave Daniel Dubois a lot of advice. Tried to congratulate him. And we are live. How's it going, everyone? Hope you guys are all doing well. As you can probably tell by the thumbnail or the title, or you may have seen an announcement across social media, I am calling it a day for Punch Perfect Boxing. It's a big piece of news, and I'm sure it comes as a real shock. I've been really busy over the last couple of months putting out content, and that is ultimately because I wanted the channel to finish on a high. I didn't want to have another break and then eventually decide to step away. I made this decision a while ago and decided, you know what, I'm going to really put out the content, because for the past 5 years, I've put a lot into this channel. You guys have put a lot into supporting me, and I felt like I owed it to myself, to the channel, and to you guys to finish on a high and really put a good run of consistent content out there and give you the best breakdown videos that I can. So ultimately, that's what I've tried to do. But this decision was made a while ago, and I'm completely at peace with it. Sometimes when creators step away from YouTube or the various platforms that they're on, it can sometimes be for, reasons where perhaps they're not doing too well, they don't feel great, or perhaps something's happened in their personal life that's maybe holding them back. That's not the case with me. I'm in a really good place. I'm really happy, and I'm ultimately at peace with this decision. Stepping away from Punch Perfect will allow me. It was a fight where you expected Daniel Dubois to start a bit hastily, punch himself out, and then maybe Jarrell Miller exposes him late on, and maybe Daniel Dubois can't hack it. That wasn't the case. Daniel Dubois, a bit shaky in kind of the first half of the fight, and Jarrell Miller showed signs that maybe he was going to get on top. But when Daniel Dubois needed to grab the fight by the scruff of the neck, he showed that initiative, and he just went on a run of beating down on Jarrell Miller. And I think he realised, this guy is so heavy, he's so durable, got such a good chin, I'm not going to be able to put him away. I'm just going to have to keep hitting him hard until someone intervenes. And that came in the 10th and final round. And that, for me, felt like the coming-of-age moment for Daniel Dubois. I think mentally, he ticked a lot of boxes that night. Even physically, with his engine, he showed that he could outlast someone that's quite durable and is in your face all night. But from there, they match him against Filip Hrgović on the Matchroom vs Queensberry 5v5. And Filip Hrgović at that time was rated higher in the heavyweight division. He was still undefeated at that point, had a big reputation from the amateurs. Had kind of had a bit of a stalled pro career, but everyone believed that the fear factor would all, work out for him eventually. And when he got in against Daniel Dubois, you thought Filip Hrgović would be the favourite. And how would Dubois deal with someone like Filip Hrgović? Well, he got hit an awful lot. Filip Hrgović had his way with Daniel Dubois for most of that fight. He just was landing right hands at will, but they were bouncing off the chin of Daniel Dubois. The issue is for Filip Hrgović, he just assumed Daniel Dubois was every other opponent he'd faced, and when he keeps landing right hands, eventually he'll go down and the fight will be over. Filip Hrgović was ignorant, and he didn't plan for anything else. And Daniel Dubois was able to outlast him, and then decided to go for some roughhouse tactics. He was sticking the head in. He was being rough. He was getting hold of Hrgović, who was clearly tiring. And that led to a cut. Ultimately, it was deemed a punch that caused the cut. It wasn't. It was the reckless use of the head from Daniel Dubois. He was throwing himself in. And that led to the cuts. But Daniel Dubois, once the cuts were inflicted, sensed his opportunity, grabbed it with both hands and started to really beat up on Filip Hrgović and really started to take the fight to him. Eventually, the fight was stopped before the cuts and Daniel Dubois was ruled the victor. But again, he answered a lot of questions that night because he took a lot of big shots from Filip Hrgović and he came out on the other side of it. And with that win, that meant that he was the IBF interim champion, but with Usyk Fury being the rematch being scheduled, it meant ultimately that he would be elevated to full champion, and that would lead to the biggest fight possible for him outside of Tyson Fury in Anthony Joshua, which took place at Wembley Stadium in the September of 2024. I was there. It was my first stadium event, and turning up there, I thought again, whilst Daniel Dubois has answered so many questions, Anthony Joshua is on a good run of form. And if he lands the shots that Hrgović was landing, surely Dubois just can't walk through those as well. Well, he didn't need to walk through them because he decided to walk right through AJ right from the off. He came out and he set about AJ from the word go. He landed a stiff jab, then connected with a right hand. And from that moment, AJ was befuddled. He wasn't on steady legs. He was scared. And Daniel Dubois had the beating of him from that moment. AJ provided plenty of entertainment and in the fifth round connected with a big right hand of his own that sent Daniel Dubois on the retreat. But as AJ went in to try and inflict more damage, Daniel Dubois caught him with a beautiful counter right hand and AJ was out for the count and Wembley erupted. And that was the biggest win of the career of Daniel Dubois so far. And that's where we're at. He was supposed to fight Joseph Parker, but unfortunately that fight fell through. That would have been an interesting test for him because Joseph Parker is a completely different style to the styles he's been beating and been facing since Alexander Usyk. And it would have been a good warm-up fight for him if he could come through that to face Alexander Usyk. Joseph Parker isn't a southpaw, but he's a good boxer. And I think that would have prepared Dubois well if he could get through Joseph Parker. Would have been another great name to have on the resume as well. I think it's a bit frustrating that he lost that little bit of momentum that he was building. But he goes into this fight full of confidence, having answered a lot of questions about himself, answered a lot of doubters, and he will be heading to this full of confidence. Alexander Usyk, on the other hand, has continued to do Alexander Usyk things in those 2 years, and that is to become undisputed at heavyweight after being undisputed at cruiserweight. What he's done is all-time great. He was already an all-time great cruiserweight, for me up there with Evander Holyfield as the greatest, and now with his run at heavyweight, he is no doubt one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. And when you combine both divisions, he is simply one of the greatest fighters to ever do this. The first fight with Tyson Fury was a real battle. I thought that he won the fight regardless of the knockdown where he actually hurt Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury obviously didn't go down, the ropes held him up, but obviously a knockdown was scored. Even without that, I thought that Alexander Usyk did enough, but with that knockdown, I thought it kind of put it clear for him. But I thought it was a competitive fight. I thought Tyson Fury, especially in the middle rounds, really worked Alexander Usyk and looked like Tyson Fury of old. In the rematch, Tyson Fury, I think, overthought things and thought he needed to do things really different. And instead, it made him worse. And Alexander Usyk won at a canter in the rematch, in my opinion. I didn't think the rematch was that competitive. I thought the first fight was legitimately competitive, and Fury showed some of the best work we've seen from Tyson Fury in recent years, especially in that middle portion. Round 5 really stands out. But in the rematch, I thought he overthought things and tried a little bit too hard to do things differently. Instead, he just needed to fine-tune what he did the first time around. But Alexander Usyk was able to get the better of him in the rematch as well. Obviously, during that period, he became undisputed in the first fight, but then had to drop the IBF belt. That's how Daniel Dubois picked it up and has since defended it. And this is how he gets the opportunity to go for undisputed for a second time at heavyweight, which puts him amongst some elite company. So an amazing opportunity for Alexander Usyk just to continue to write his legacy. I mean, if he were to retire after this fight and he wins on Saturday, you're looking at 2 wins over Anthony Joshua, 2 wins over Tyson Fury, and 2 wins over Daniel Dubois. It's legendary stuff, but that's what we know Alexander Usyk for. One of the greatest runs in cruiserweight history, in my opinion, the greatest run in cruiserweight history. What he did leading up to the World Boxing Super Series final, and then eventually moving up to heavyweight, and what he's done there as well. It's been simply incredible. He's not quite the fighter he once was. I think even looking at him versus how he looked for the first AJ fight, I think he's slowed down since will allow me to just have a little bit more free time to be able to focus on, sort of personal aspirations and goals that I want to achieve. and ultimately means I can just be a fight fan again. I love doing the breakdowns, and I'm sure that in the upcoming months, when we have some big fights coming our way, Canelo versus Crawford, the November card, I will get the urge again to sort of jump back on the microphone and give you guys a breakdown. But I'm also looking forward to it not really mattering what my opinion is and just watching as a fan and not having to give any thoughts or breakdown or put any real thought into it. And I can just watch the fights and enjoy them and not really worry about the result. And I love engaging with you guys and interacting with you guys, but also just being able to watch a fight and then switch off from it afterwards will be a good feeling too. So I'm really looking forward to being able to concentrate on some things that are really important to me in my personal life and my career, but also being able to just return to being an avid fight fan like you guys are. So there's some of the reasons ultimately behind this decision. I wanted And he ultimately
to
isn't
talk
as
about
slick
some of the
or as good or doesn't have the engine of Alexander Usyk. Daniel Dubois got in with those three opponents, and whilst I think he had to figure things out against Jarrell Miller, against Hrgovic, he had to take a bit of a beating early on, but get through it. Against Alexander Usyk, is going to be completely different. The first 5 seconds alone are going to be completely different. Daniel Dubois is going to have to think more in the first round of this fight than he did in any round against Miller, Hrgovic, or Joshua. And why is that? Because Alexander Usyk makes you think. He makes you work mentally and physically. He bops up and down. He gets that lead hand out and he uses it like a wand. He sort of flick and swishes it. He'll lift it up. He'll move it down. He'll probe. He'll prod. He'll sort of move it side to side or sort of swing it around in a circle. And he does that to distract you. Hrgovic, Miller, AJ, none of them have the lead hand that Alexander Usyk does. And combine that with the fact that he's constantly on the move and is never a stationary target, it becomes really difficult to read. And your concentration levels are 10 times higher for Alexander Usyk. And that's ultimately why people tire out. So whilst I think Daniel Dubois has been incredible these last 2 years, he's answered so many questions. I thought he came of age against Miller. And since then, he's just been tremendous. He's in against a completely different fighter in Alexander Usyk. And 2 years ago, he could not work him out. And he has done nothing in these 2 years to be able to work him out. He's improved as a fighter, as a person, mentally, physically. I think physically he looks so much more imposing now. He's always been a big guy, Dubois, but I think he looks like a man now. I think he's really got his man strength. I think that's developed. But stylistically, he's not learned anything in these past 2 years that can overcome that deficit. The only thing he's learned is that if he lands a body shot a little bit higher, he might be able to hurt Alexander Usyk. So how does Daniel Dubois go about winning this weekend? I've got an obvious take, which everyone's going to say, and everyone says before every Alexander Usyk fight, he hates it to the body. Now, Alexander Usyk simply hates it to the body. It's the one time he's emotionless all the time, but the one time you'll see him lose his poker face is when he's hit to the body. It dates back to the amateurs when Artur Beterbiev was able to hurt him to the body. In the pros, we've seen Murat Gassiev, hurt him to the body. AJ's had some success. Tyson Fury, I thought, had some success as well when he was throwing the uppercuts through the middle. And the reason that you know that Alexander Usyk doesn't like them, like I say, is because he loses that poker face. And what he'll either do is sort of smirk to let you know, okay, you've landed that shot, or he'll complain to the referee that it was low or sort of suggest that he needs to keep him up. And he's doing that to make sure that the referee's keeping an eye. And if one does land, the referee will intervene and punish the opponent for landing one there. But it's quite obvious that Alexander Usyk doesn't like it to the body. But do you not think so many opponents now have known that and tried to consistently get to the body, and none of them have been able to do it? I think that's the genius of Alexander Usyk, is that he'll give up one opportunity, sure, but he doesn't give you that opportunity again. So Daniel Dubois is going to have to find ways to land to the body, but also keep landing to the body, because one shot won't do it. Usyk will recover and you'll be able to move away. You're going to need to throw 2 or 3 more to make sure that Usyk is in some real bother and in some real trouble. And I think Alexander Usyk is the type that is so smart that genuinely, if he was hurt to the body, he would take a knee. And he would trust them in the fact that he will recover and be able to go through the gears to make sure he wins the fight. So Daniel Dubois has got to find a way to consistently get to the body. For me, another big factor is I think he needs to throw in combinations more. I think in the first fight, he tried to go tit for tat with Usyk, and it was just redundant. It just didn't work. You wait for Usyk to throw, he lands, You then try and throw in response, you miss, he then counters with something, and it's just the same game of cat and mouse, but it's every single time it's Usyk that wins. I think for Dubois, he needs to implement some of the things that I thought AJ did really well in the rematch. Again, AJ lost that fight quite convincingly, in my opinion. But I thought AJ had the right approach. He just couldn't execute fully for 12 rounds, and Usyk is just too good. But I think when AJ let his hands go a little bit more in combinations, he gave Usyk some problems. And I thought Tyson Fury in the first fight, in the middle rounds, when he was letting those combinations go, starting it with an uppercut through the middle and sort of building off there, I thought he had real success in those middle rounds. The thing you've ultimately got to trust is if you throw 5 punches, you're probably going to miss 4 of them. But if you can connect with one, and then Usyk has to reset himself, or he's trapped in the corner or whatever, or he's there in front of you, if you throw another 5, you might just land another one. But you have to be comfortable with that. And if you can just land one big shot, the judges will reward it, and ultimately it will chip away at Alexander Usyk. When you throw in flurries, he does have to reset himself, Alexander Usyk. And I think Anthony Joshua, and we've seen it before, guys like Marius Bradis that were just on Usyk's chest. Chisora, I thought, lost comfortably, but in the early rounds when he was just on Usyk's chest, he gave him problems. If you can swarm him and let your punches go in combinations and in flurries, you do make it more difficult for Usyk. The issue is with all those fighters, apart from Bradis, who was able to keep it up for 12 rounds, all of those fighters fatigued heavily as a result. Because throwing a lot of punches and trying to just land one can be a real issue. And I think that's why if Daniel Dubois tries to win this over 12 rounds, it might just be an impossible task against Alexander Usyk, who's got elite conditioning, his ring IQ, his sense of killer instinct and when to turn it up a notch, and when he needs to win a round, he always goes out there and wins it and then wins the next one and then the next one. I think you shouldn't treat it like a 12-round fight against Usyk. So many fighters have tried and all of them have failed. I think the plan here should be for Daniel Dubois is to rush Alexander Usyk. I know it will sound crazy because in the second half of the fight, if it gets there and he hasn't made a dent or got rid of Usyk, he is ultimately going to be flat out on his feet because he's going to be so tired from pressing. But I think you've got to go for it. I think from the word go, you've got to let that jab go. He's got fantastic jab, Daniel Dubois. If he can connect with it early, it will throw Usyk off a little bit. And then if he can just continuously chip away at the body, let those combinations go, steam in with the head as well, like Dubois does. It's dirty, should get punished for it, but ultimately you've got to try and win the fight any which way. I think Dubois has got to really just roughhouse tactics this. And I think you got to treat it as like a 6 to 8 round fight. Don't treat it as a 12 rounder. Don't try and nick rounds. Don't try and beat him over the distance, because Usyk will always find ways to win the round that he needs to win. So that's how I think Daniel Dubois can do things differently. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's a different ball game on Saturday night when he gets in there and Usyk is jumping up and down and he's getting that lead hand going. He's popping in with shots from all angles. He was able to do it against Tyson Fury, who defensively is more savvy. Usyk was still able to land that left hand with absolute ease. And it's because he just veers you off in different directions. He distracts you. He gets your attention in different ways. And mentally and physically, it is so draining having to concentrate that hard against someone like Alexander Usyk that I think mentally he'll just take over late on in this fight again. I think a stoppage could happen because I think Dubois will just mentally be worn out. I think I'm going to go for a very similar fight to the second fight with Anthony Joshua, where Alexander Usyk was able to just control the fight, but AJ would have his moments, and then late on he had a big round. But from there, Alexander Usyk does what he always does when he has a bad round go against him. He rebounds and then makes sure that he wins the next 2-3 rounds and secures the victory. So that's how I see it playing out. I just don't think Daniel Dubois has done anything in the 2 years other than find that confidence to be able to challenge Usyk just stylistically. It was very one-sided the first time around, and a controversial low blow, was a minuscule moment in it. And again, you can say, well, it should have been a knockdown. Does that mean that Usyk would have not beaten the 10 count and would have been out for good? My money would have been on Alexander Usyk getting up, taking the time to recover, and then being able to bounce back even stronger, because that's exactly what he always does. So really fond of Daniel Dubois. I love the fact he's been able to rebuild himself and sort of re-establish himself from kind of a perennial top 10 heavyweight to now being a certified top 5 heavyweight. He's become a world champion. He's still got years ahead of him after this as well. Just losing to Usyk won't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. He can still beat any other heavyweight on his day. But I just feel he hasn't really done enough to close that gap from the fight that we saw 2 years ago. Unless Alexander Usyk ages overnight and Dubois just gets him at the right time. But we've got no real indication of that. I think the only final thing to mention is I think people will question Alexander Usyk and Alex Krashuk's relationship coming to an end. How will that impact things? For me, I think there's something a little bit orchestrated there. I think the pair of them know what they're doing, and I don't think it'll have too much impact on fight night. I still think Krashuk will be supporting him, and it won't make too much of a difference. So I think Alexander Usyk is going to repeat. Let me know your thoughts down below, guys. It's a big fight week, so I have more predictions coming. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time. I wanted to talk about some of the highlights and the memories on this 5-year journey. You know, over 700 videos, over 9,000 subscribers, over 1 million views. I've had some amazing accomplishments, but also I've been able to meet some amazing people like Colin Nathan, Nonito Donaire, who was a childhood hero of mine. The first year of me watching boxing was back in 2007. And that year, Nonito Donaire chinned Victor Chinian. Years later, I'm sat on a podcast talking about that moment with him, and then getting to go over to Las Vegas to, see him spar as he prepared to face the monster Naoya Inoue in a rematch. Just life-changing experiences that I'll cherish forever. The intro to this video, getting a shout out on Sky Sports here in the UK, which has always been, sort of the main sports broadcaster over here in the UK, from a broadcasting legend like Christina Poncha, on a fight card that was over in Japan, which is ultimately what my channel has become renowned for. I've covered Japanese boxing and Asian boxing more than any other of the mainstream channels out there. So that was a special moment. The knockout happened in the round that I predicted. When you're that good, when you're that well conditioned, when you're that experienced and that seasoned, he's managed to avoid injuries over the last couple of years, which did start to impact him when he first moved up to heavyweight. I think Alexander Usyk is still an absolutely tremendous operator. So, with the last 2 years covered and their first fight covered, how do I think things play out this weekend? Well, I think an important factor to cover first and foremost is that Alexander Usyk is not Jarrell Miller. He's far more mobile. He's a southpaw. He's far more skilled. His engine's far better. He's quicker. He does everything differently to Jarrell Miller. He is not Filip Hrgović. He's not robotic. He's not arrogant. He's not just going to look for one punch repeatedly, hoping you fall over. He's not just going to gas out when eventually his tactics don't work. He's the complete opposite of Filip Hrgović. He's also not Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua is the best of those names I just mentioned, but Anthony Joshua can be hit, can be hurt, and does have his fragilities. Knockout happened in the round that ultimately isn't as slick. And also, what was so special about that moment wasn't just that feeling that I got when it happened. It was my phone blowing up because everyone was messaging me saying, "Yo, you just got a shout out. Oh my God, that's so sick." And you guys being just as excited about it as me showed that you guys really do care about this channel and shows your level of support. So I've lived some amazing moments through this channel that I'll always cherish. And I just want to thank you guys. That's how I'll sign off, is just thanking you guys for being a part of the journey, whether you were there from the start in sort of the creation of the channel in the early days, whether you kind of joined halfway through and have seen me kind of get those big opportunities, kind of get over the line of being a small channel and having to really put yourself out there, to being, a sort of reasonable channel with good engagement where you start to get opportunities, through to being a decent sized channel now. Obviously, in the grand scheme of YouTube, it's still a tiny channel, but in the boxing world, it's not doing too badly. And having you guys support me has been absolutely incredible. I don't want to mention individuals because I feel like I'll forget someone, and I'd hate to do that because so many of you have been tried to congratulate him on being such a great fighter and telling him he can come again. But ultimately, it felt like we wouldn't necessarily see this fight again in the near future. And after seeing Daniel Dubois again deciding he can't continue and making that decision for himself, those negative connotations about being a quitter were more rife than ever. And it felt like at that stage, although he was still young and could obviously come again, the rebuild was going to be really important. And the next couple of fights were either going to make or break Daniel Dubois. And sitting here 2 years later, we can now say those fights made Daniel Dubois. So what's happened in those 2 years that have made Daniel Dubois? His first fight back was against Jarrell Miller. There would be many people, including myself around that time, that would tell you, what a stupid bit of matchmaking. Daniel Dubois has shown mental fragility. Physically, he's shown some fragility as well. Jarrell Big Baby Miller is confident, he's brash, but he's a lump. He's hard to shift. He's got a good chin and he's durable. He's got a decent engine, but that's not the reason he's hard to shift. It's because he's so damn heavy. And it just felt like a fight where Daniel Dubois would have to have his mettle tested once again. And Jarrell Miller would be in his face all night long. So many of you have been. It was a fight where you expected Daniel Dubois, and so many of you have shown so much love and support over the years for Punch Perfect and for me. So I really appreciate it. Whenever I've had my breaks or not felt great and not been recording, you guys have always tried to sort of lift me up and motivate me to get back to doing the videos. But I don't want to have any of those breaks again. I'd rather just leave it on a high. I've made this decision a while ago. It's a decision I'm happy with. I'm doing really well. I'm fit. I'm healthy. And I'm just looking forward as the boxing schedule ramps up to just being a fan once again. So I want to thank you guys so much for your support along this journey. I will be going live on Thursday, the 24th of July at 8 p.m. I'd love you guys to join and just talk about the channel. Talk about when you subscribed, the first video you watched, your favorite video, any predictions you think I got completely wrong and want to remind me of before I go. You know, just celebrate this journey, and ultimately you guys I'd like to be able to thank individually as well. I won't do it here because I'll forget someone, but if you join the live stream, I'll be able to sort of give you guys a special mention. So thank you so much for supporting. Got a great schedule coming up. There's so many great channels out there that have been on my channel that you can go and watch. But yeah, there is plenty of boxing out there, so you'll live without me. But thank you guys so much for supporting over the years. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, this has been Punch Perfect Boxing. Peace.